Hi, and welcome to InFocus. This is Jabbar Al-Ubaidi. In this episode, we're going to go global Africa. This is a call for the international community to open its eyes, collectively their eyes, the global community eyes, to the countries in a very important and very essential part of the globe, which is the African countries and the African people. And with me, two gentlemen. It happened that I met with them when they were here in Bridgewater, at the Bridgewater State University, because they were actually participants with the Mandela Fellowship or Washington Mandela Fellowship program. And to be fair, for their long resume, I will ask each of my colleagues to introduce themselves so our audience will understand what I'm talking about. And I hope our audience that you can either when we finish this program to call me directly or to the executive producer, Jeff Fowler, because this is the first episode that will talk about global Africa in the time of the coronavirus. This is a very novel virus, and I know it does not discriminate between people. So to our guests, thank you so much for joining us. And I will start with Chol, and you are now in Kenya, right?
Kenya. Yeah. Yes.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, please, as you feel comfortable with.
Thank you very much, Professor Jabbar, for the opportunity to be on your program. My name is Chol Dwang, a South Sudanese journalist and a political activist and literacy activist. I'm now based in Kenya, a part of the East African region. Of course, I was in Massachusetts, Boston last year on the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program, where I was actually based here at the Bridgewater State University. I'm happy to be on the show.
Thank you so much. And my friend?
Thank you, Dr. Al-Ubaidi. My name is Tsepo Mahlari. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I am a public interest lawyer, as well as a closet social activist, so to speak. So my wider knowledge within the country's public law, what law impacts on the public.
So now we have two countries and probably actually three countries in terms of the knowledge. I know South Africa, and you are talking from the capital, but about South Sudan and also about Kenya, just to give our audience a sense of how separate is this outrageous virus, the pandemic. How is it there in Kenya, and how is it in South Sudan? Sure.
Yeah, actually, to talk about this crisis, the public health crisis, which has engulfed the entire world, and looking at South Sudan and Kenya, where I am currently staying, you will see that citizens are very, very worried. They are very concerned about their health and about when this crisis will come to an end, and especially with South Sudan, which largely depends on the health support from WHO. It's a huge concern in the country right now. And of course, although South Sudan has recorded the lowest number of the coronavirus cases, still there is a lot of concern around the country with how best the country is going to cope with this situation. You may agree with me that the country is very new, having attained independence in 2011 after several years of conflict. There are no strong uh, health facilities that can be able to cope with this. And also looking at Kenya, at least Kenya is way ahead uh, compared with South Sudan, rather.
How about South Africa?
South Africa is, if you were looking at the statistics at this very moment, South Africa is leading with the positive diagnostic. It's leading with which are sitting at about 2,600 as of yesterday, 48 deaths, and it's the highest again in the continent. So there is also an exposure of there's about 900 recoveries, which indicates that there is a positive in that particular front. But I think, as Chol has stated, I can just summarize a few of the critical problems that are faced with. Vulnerable public health system, socio-economic impact that is currently unfolding as a result of the lockout and of the lockdown, and that will greatly manifest post the pandemic. The impact of border closures, because a lot of the countries, of the neighboring countries, are depending on South Africa's ports. So that lockdown inevitably impacts on Zambia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Swaziland or Eswatini, to Botswana, all of whom are dependent in South Africa. And of course, domestically, the inevitable uncertainty related to when is the lockdown going to be eased, what's going to be the total impact on jobs, what is going to be an impact on businesses that are responsible for sustaining what was already a dwindling economy, both in South Africa, in the region, in SADC, and continentally, and inevitably globally, because we are in a globalized society.
The question is now, I mean, how the international community responds. And as you know, as Joel mentioned, and I said we're going to come back to this point, yesterday, precisely, which was April 16, President Trump decided to withhold the funding to the World Health Organization. And also he said he has a problem with the World Trade Organization. So the WHO, of course, they got about 20% from the United States. Okay, do you think this is the right time actually to do so? And even if you have disagreement with the leadership or whatever, but is this really the right time to put this call forward and say, okay, we're not going to be able to fund this organization, the World Health Organization? What's the reaction was that, and what's your sense of that? Anyone can jump on this, please.
It's to say it was disappointing will be an understatement, perhaps greatly heartbreaking. When a major world force, such as the United States of America, opt to take a decision such as this one, especially when one considers the timing of what is clearly established is this: the pandemic has not been discriminated. It has impacted, it has ravaged the globe. The United States of America, as things stands, it's currently leading with regards to the impact. Europe, it's impacted. Africa, South America. You can think of any part of the globe the fact of the matter is that it is undeniable that the United States is a major player and a major influence in this, and it has always taken lead with regards to playing its role with regards to health-related issues and pandemics. As we have already seen, the President Obama had actually pointed out the reality of sort of soothsaying that this pandemic such as this one is going to happen. But the problem, I think, or the disappointment comes from the fact that one cannot, I think that the decision of the President of the United States has the consequences that are yet to be felt, because the pandemic is not going away tomorrow or next month or a month after. It's going to be here and it's going to manifest itself. And I think that a rational plea will be a reconsideration under the circumstances and dealing with the issues therein after.
Paul, do you think there is a possibility for reconsideration? Yes, Joel, please.
Yeah, I think the debate around East Africa currently is that why would the U.S., a country which has played a very big role, decide to cut funding in the middle of a crisis such as this pandemic? So the discussions that this has become somehow somewhat political, and that global leaders are playing politics, trying to score certain interests out of this crisis. And the thing is that the U.S. Should really need to reconsider the decision that it has already taken. And just like Seppo has mentioned, this crisis should be fought, with a united front rather than each country taking its own path to push back the scourge or the effects of this virus. And especially a country like South Sudan, you already know that it has been going through a conflict, a civil war, and that has not given it any opportunity to build its infrastructure. And of course, it has always depended on the funding that comes from WHO, which the U.S. has contributed immensely compared with other countries. And so the question is that the U.S. should really need to reconsider this decision in order for people to get out of this virus first, and after that the countries, of course, will be able to see what they can do next. But however, this is a wake-up call for the African governments and leaders to be able to build their own infrastructure and not depending on foreign aid such as this. It has now left Africa in a very difficult situation, not knowing how best they can be able to fight this. And you already know that the virus has already been politicized so much by the world powers. So we would, of course, from the discussion that we've been following around East Africa, and especially in South Sudan and Kenya, everyone is asking the U.S. need to reconsider this decision, so that maybe after people get out of this situation, this embarrassing situation, they can be able to, of course, review their engagement with WHO.
What's the legal stand on this when it comes to funding and also helping other nations? I mean, it must be there's a legal stand and also, of course, social obligation and cultural necessity. So could you speak to that legal stand, Pitses? Yeah.
I think one of the impediments, of course, is the territorial sovereignty of each country. That's well accepted under international law. And each and every country has a right and perhaps an entitlement to decide on how to spend its own money. But the truth of the matter is this: no single country exist in isolation. That's just a fact. And America in itself, it's built by foreign hands. That's just another fact. And that should indicate to each and every one, especially the ones who are in power, that the yield of power should be for the betterment of the globe, because ultimately each and every decision that's been taken, it's a decision, even if it's taken in from a vantage point of one country, its impact are inevitably going to be global. And it is precisely for that reason that I actually even think that one should implore a sense of sanity from our decision maker, because that sense of sanity is what we all strive for. It's what builds peace. It's what builds healthy society. It's what we aspire for our individual selves, for our nations, and for our humanity as a whole. I think that should be the focal point of every decision making, especially in a political sphere, and especially faced with a global pandemic such as this one.
Who's the voice there and from the African Union?
Yeah, I think based on what the announcements that have been making round is that the African Union is also looking at and reviewing, trying to understand exactly the statement by the U.S. Administration, while carefully making statements that do not complicate the whole situation. You may have come across it about 2 weeks ago that the AU chairperson, that is Musa Faki, making a very political sort of statement regarding how the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros, has found himself in a difficulty between global politics, having been accused of not advising the countries at the very early stage of this virus when it was first reported in China. But all in all, the thing is that the very common people on the African continent do not want this to be politicized, that, okay, political integrations or unions trying to take side or trying to make their stand in a way that is going to endanger their own lives, their own situation in this very difficult moment. In the meantime, the conversation on the street, of Nairobi and around East Africa is that people are very afraid, and it's even made worse by this new announcement coming out of White House of cutting funding to the WHO.
I just want to point out one important fact that I think I may have omitted. A lot of cases are determined on testing, and testing needs testing kits, and testing kits need money. And many of the countries would not have budgeted for this pandemic because of its origination and for a longest time its concentration, which was in Wuhan, China.
Is that we need to depoliticize humanitarian service around the world. We need to be mindful that the people that we help are not politicians. These are common people who are struggling day in, day out to provide for their families, and these are also part of the people who make up what we call a nation and maybe a global community. And therefore, I would advise politicians, wherever they are, whether in the West or in Africa or in China, to depoliticize humanitarian service and step beyond politics and be able to help those that are affected by this coronavirus. And of course, asking about how best people can be assisted, I would still uh, encourage people to support the populations around the world through NGOs, local NGOs, of course, through health partners, and through even including the media, and everyone I think should be involved in uh, making sure that people are helped out of this crisis so that they can rebuild their lives again.
Thank you. Sir, please.
True to what Chol has said. Firstly, on the vision, I think the most important thing is to get the messaging right as regards what you can do at a household level, at an individual level, to cap the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. That's important. Secondly, we have got to delegitimize fake stories that are being peddled across with regards to the coronavirus. The racial undertones that we find being peddled around, we have got to demystify them, and we have got to get a truthful, coherent messaging out there, and resist the edge, for example, on social media, to just peddle about just about every information that delegitimize people that are working honestly to combat the spread of the pandemic. Thirdly, I think that it is important that we know that we are part of the solution. So whichever credible medical advisory that is out there, we should make sure that we adhere to, because in our individualistic selves, we form part of the community that is impacted. And it is important that we do our bidding. And by that, I mean we do our bidding from doing our hygienic role, playing our hygienic role. I mean that by speaking, spreading the right message. I mean that by getting philanthropies in your communities to rally together in every measure to combat the deteriorating situation that is so unprecedented, and that is unfolding, and that is realistic. And as regards to what we can do, the fact of the matter is that almost every one of us, unless we blind ourselves intentionally, know someone who is in need. We have got to congregate ourselves towards the needy members of our community. Reach out, speak to the individuals, and find out and understand what their truest needs are. And then find measures and civil organizations that have proven experience and expertise in reacting to crisis, and reacting to a crisis, and who are able to spread to deliver and spread what is needed by many households. It doesn't matter whether you are in Italy, you are in Spain, you are in South Africa, you are in.
This is global.
The need is just undeniable. Certain families have people who cannot move around. We have got to familiarize ourselves with those families. Who are they? Where are they? What is their needs? And how can we ensure that their needs are adhered and attended to? Because what we also should not forget is that the gravity of this pandemic is that it has isolated us. We are now concentrating ourselves into our own household. Whereas we would traditionally be able to go and check out on our neighbors, now we can't do that as easily as we could before. So we have got to find measures. We have got to understand who are the people who are out there, who are the people who are in need, and then mobilize our resources towards making sure that those particular individuals' very dire situations are mitigated. This is the time for civil society, for neighbors, for our own individual humanity to come into play and play our very respective role. And also negate the mindset that says my hand is not good enough. The truest fact is that a giving hand is a noble hand, and we should never forget.
So it's a mobilization of resources, and also I like the idea of be part of the solutions. Chol, I'll give you the last word. Chol Duang is a journalist from South Sudan, now is based in Kenya.
Yeah, just like my good friend Sepo has mentioned, we have a very big responsibility as a people of the world to unite against the coronavirus and ensure that everyone makes it out of this embarrassing situation. I call it because you can see how it has isolated each and everyone, which has never happened before. And so we need each other, we need one another ever more than before. And of course, by doing that, we need to rally for support globally and inject that support where it's really needed and direly needed, if I should put it that way. And of course, we need also to rescue Africa before the situation gets out of hand. We should be very thankful that we still are recording the lowest number of cases on the continent, and so we still have the opportunity to be able to help our people not to get infected by this virus.
Yeah, so it's again, a mobilization of resources is really well said, and also be part of the solution. Thank you to both of you. Both are good friends to me, and this global call is important. We're gonna press hard through media and other means, to make sure that the word is out to help the African continent and the countries and the people. So thank you, Chol Duang, a journalist from South Sudan, and the public interest lawyer, Alfred Muller. Did I pronounce the name right?
You're doing well.
Doing well. Thank you so much for your vision and for contribution and for the time. And thank you for watching InFocus, and we'll see you next week. Have a good day.
Thank you.